Hello photographer, welcome back to my channel. It's Belinda and this is where we talk all about photography, from inspiration to camera techniques to editing skills so that you could take better photos. So, a bit early on in December last year, the New York Photography Awards came up with their list of winners for the 2021 competition. First of all, a massive congratulations to everyone who's won. I've not personally entered into this competition, but I just thought it would be fun to maybe burn some bridges and talk about people behind their backs. Well, obviously that's not what this video is about. This video is not intended to be a personal attack to any one of these photographers and their work. Rather, I would speak my thoughts as they come up upon seeing those photos, and also give my thoughts as to whether I think this photo competition is one that's worthy of entering. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. Alright, so here we are at the homepage of the New York Photography Awards. And let's head over to the winners. Okay, so that's quite a bit of work with both professional and amateur categories. Let's try to narrow this down. I'm gonna go for 2021 and category winners maybe? Right, so for category winners there's just one page. So let's begin. This looks quite interesting. So this is titled The Magic of Horses, photographed by Joanna, category, special category, others. The caption reads, Magic of Horses series. These amazing creatures hold a special place in my heart. In this series of photos, I wanted to portray horses as graceful and powerful. I hope I've been able to create the magical ambience in the photos that suits this wonderful, exquisite creature the best. Alright, so basically, in this entry we have a mini series of 4 photos of a horse galloping across the plains, which is shot during golden hours, so it's either sunset or sunrise. The first thing that stood out to me from this submission is the lighting under which the photos were shot. So before we even talk about the merits of the photos themselves, so like the technical qualities of the photos and the composition and whatnot, I think it's worth noting that the photographer has put in the effort and taken the trouble to go get these shots at golden hour. I think quite a bit of discussion we have today around photography surrounds a lot of nitty-gritty stuff in terms of making a photo technically perfect, but we don't pay nearly as much attention to the making of a nice photo. So here we are seeing the work of a photographer who understands the importance of putting herself in the right place in the right time. I personally find that there could have been a bit too much sharpening in these photos. So for instance, if you look at the hairs of the horse and also the bits of grass, I'm just guessing, but I think that there has been sharpening applied. It looks a bit too much to me personally. For instance, if I was to guess, in this picture there might have been some clarity added to the photo. What I especially like is the photographer's deliberate usage of the sunlight, which would have been at a low angle because of the golden hour timings, to create a rim lighting effect around the outlines of the horse. All in all, I think the series does what the photographer wanted to do, which is to portray horses as graceful and powerful. So next up, we are looking at a series titled Yellow Cab, photographed by Christian, entered into category of New York Photography Abstract. Let's see what the caption says. The famous yellow cab taxis are part of New York City's image. Thousands of them driving through the grids of the city, transporting people, stories and experiences through a maze of streets and destinations. Okay, so again, it's a mini-series consisting of 4 photos taken in urban New York City, featuring the yellow cab, which kind of pops out from the rest of the background where everything is turned into black and white. The first thing that I have to say is that the idea of photographing a yellow cab against urban New York is pretty much a cliche. It's a concept that has been done over and over again so many times. If you just search up photography in New York, you probably see a handful of images within a few scrolls of basically the same thing. It's a little bit like how buses, the red buses, are a little of a cliche here in London. It's certainly a classic and it's certainly worth photographing. However, if I were to base an entire photo series or a project on this concept, I would, rather than basing it entirely on this concept alone, I would probably think of ways to shoot it using another angle that isn't as commonplace as it is to do it just straight on. So moving on to the technical bits of the series, it does fit really well into the category of abstraction because of the way it's edited. Everything in this series is in black and white except for the caps. So turning something black and white is probably the best way and the easiest way to turn it into an abstract photograph. And from these photos, I do see that the photographer has imparted his own character into his work, in a sense that the edits were deliberately made very high contrast and the blacks deliberately crunched. You can tell from these photographs that it's a consistent vibe that the photographer is producing. The only thing though in this photo is I think it kind of undergone quite a substantial amount of noise reduction, because you see that the colors are kind of patchy in the bodies of the cars and they don't transition as gradually as they should, and there is quite a bit of loss of detail in the surfaces of these cars, which is typically a result of reducing the noise. Based on how the street lamps were lit and also how the stores were lit on the side of the road, this is probably shot at night, but regardless, it was shot when it was like raining heavily, and so it probably was shot with a rather high ISO, and therefore the photographer had to reduce the noise, and I think this would be a reasonable guess. So overall, a pretty classic looking set of photos. Okay, next we have an entry titled Grandfather So Close So Far, photographed by Unai, I hope that I'm not pronouncing this wrong, and entered into COVID-related photography social distancing. The caption reads, Miguel, 90 years old, at his home during the 4th week of a total lockdown in the Spanish town of Uhat, same thing, not sure how to pronounce it. After covering a story at the local newspaper where I work, I went to visit my grandfather, Miguel, who lives alone at home. We sit together in the entrance of his building. We press our hands against each other, separated by a narrow sliver of window. A very warm greeting through the glass. Spain became one of the most affected countries by COVID-19, with more than 55,000 officially recognized deaths. The vast majority have been over the age of 80 years, forcing elderly across the country into isolation in hopes of evading the deadly contagion. The loneliness of old people has been one of the emotional consequences of the pandemic. Okay, so this image looks pretty straightforward to me in terms of what it wants to convey. So basically you see two people pressing their hands against each other on the two sides of a glass. You see a great deal of reflection, and I think what's really smart about this photo is the way that the photographer positioned himself relative to his grandfather and also in relation to what's inside of the house. When shooting photos involving reflection, you have to be pretty strategic about how you position yourself and where you place your camera at. For instance, taking this as an example, the photographer has, I believe, deliberately placed himself in front of his grandfather because his body could provide a darker background against which the head of his grandfather could stand out. If you look at this bit, so like on the top left corner of his grandfather's head, the tones are kind of similar with that of the background. Had the photographer moved slightly, let's say towards the right, towards his right, his grandfather wouldn't have stood out that well from the background. That's my guess. In relation to reflection type of scenarios, it does take a bit of experimentation, and you'll have to take care of how you treat your subjects because that will determine whether or not and how well they stand out from a background that could be quite busy and chaotic. So yeah, overall, a very strategic photo. I like this photo, very well deserved. Okay, so that's that, and let's see what else is interesting. The apple of mother's eye. This looks quite interesting. Okay, so it's titled The Apple of Mother's Eye, photographed by Wen Huang, entered in the category of people photography -newborn. Daughters in Taiwan are as precious as pearls held in their hands. Therefore, in this work, the mother wore traditional Aboriginal clothes to hold her daughter in her arms. She used her hair band that has been passed from previous generations on the daughter's head to express her inheritance. Especially chose the larger aperture to blur the mother, which means that the mother silently pays for the child. It's a single photo entry of a mother holding her newborn. Okay, so the first thing that stood out to me is that the skin is obviously retouched. if you look at the eyes of the newborn, you do see some creases. You do see some texture of the skin, because skin has texture. But if you look at, say, the forehead, it looks so much smoother. And so this discrepancy tells us that there has been some photoshopping going on. But apart from the smoothening, I also think that there has been some sharpening applied. So if you look at the edge of the lips of the child, there is a tiny haloing effect here, which I think is a result of sharpening. And if you look at the brows as well, like these bits of hair that kind of really stood out from the skin also undergone some degree of sharpening. If we look at the face of the mother, the way that the jawline of the mother kind of blends into the neck is somewhat intriguing. But then, as explained by the photographer in the caption, the mother is not in focus, deliberately made so perhaps it was just a coincidence in the way that the light was hitting. You can also see that this bit here in the forehead has a more of a bumpy texture, whereas the cheeks are completely smooth. So this is another telltale sign that there has been skin retouch going on. That having said though, I personally do not have any issues with skin retouching per se, as long as it's used in the right context. In the context of this photo, I think the intention of the photographer is to dramatize the softness of the skin of the newborn. This also kind of ties into the choice of lighting that she opted for. So my guess is that the lighting was probably a huge light source that's close to the subjects, because the shadows are soft, which indicates that it's a large light source. But then the light fall-off is also huge. If you look at the contrast between the highlights and the shadows, there might be some editing done as well to enhance the effect. But then this shows that the intention of the photographer was to drop everything else into blacks and to emphasize on the quality of the skin, how it's glowing on newborn. While this is not necessarily something I would do myself, I do see where the photographer is coming from. If that's the intention, obviously makes sense to soften the skin of the newborn. Overall, a very meaningful portrait showing more than just the people, but also the customs and culture behind a certain ethnic group. Oh, the gherkin. Let's take a look. Okay, so yeah, it's straightforward. It's titled Gherkin because that's what the building is called. Photographed by Eduardo, entered into architecture photography - building. 30 St Mary Axe, the Gherkin, located in the financial heart of London, designed by Norman Foster, built between 2001 and 2003. It basically tells us what this building is. Again, we have a single image entry of a black and white shot of the Gherkin. The first question that came up to my mind is, why does this photo have to be in black and white? Black and white is a form of abstraction. There should be some sort of rationale behind why you would want to turn your edits into black and white when in reality everything is in color. Wait, I'm aware that if you're not in the UK, you probably do not know what the Gherkin looks like, so let me do a quick search and show you what's like. Okay, it's giving me photos of literally gherkins. No, I'm referring to the building in London. Okay, so here are some photos of what the gherkin looks like. It looks pretty nice, to be honest, even with color. One of the typical reasons why people would turn a photo into a black and white edit is because the colors do not look nice on a subject, and so if you turn it into black and white, it's basically a way of going around really nasty, bland looking colors. But then this is certainly not the case of the gherkin, so this left me wondering why the photographer has decided to do it in black and white. Personally, I would be kind of cautious in terms of using the black and white trick in editing my photos, because while it could look cool, if there's no strong rationale behind why you're doing it, it kind of means that the photo is winning because of the edits, not because of the photo itself. This happens to also be something that I've just mentioned in a recent blog post in relation to editing photos. It's basically me sharing my thoughts on what's good editing and also how much is too much when it comes to applying creative effects and whatnot. So do check it out in the description box down below if you're interested in learning more. I'm not exactly suggesting that this is the case here, because I do potentially see a reason why the photographer would turn into black and white, which is he wants to emphasize on the different shades of brightness in the clouds in the background. So yeah, again, it's a classic. If you come to London, you've got to see the gherkin. Okay, so having looked at the winning entries, let's take a final look at what you are gonna have to pay to enter and what you're gonna get potentially if you win. According to the official website, it basically says that you'll have to pay $30 for one entry as a professional and $25 per entry for amateurs or students, which I think is about the average based on what I've seen for photography awards to charge, but the price obviously does not give you the full picture, so let's also take a look at what you could potentially get out of it if you win. On a list of things that they would offer their winners, what I think is the most critical for photographers in terms of advancing their career include gallery exhibitions and social media mentions. I mean, it's obviously also good to get a chance to be interviewed and to be included in a newsletter and stuff like that. But then with these kinds of promotional channels, it's a bit harder to gauge what the reach is going to be. Whereas for social media, obviously, you can see the size of the page, and with galleries, you basically know, based on the standing of the gallery, how many people you could realistically reach. So let's take a look at the social media page of the New York Photography Awards. At the first instance, we know that there are 68 posts, so it kind of means that it is a relatively new page. Based on what I see, the engagement on the page seems to be rather average. The first post was from August the 5th of 2021. This basically means that this award is a relatively young award that has been started in 2021. And this is basically the first year that it's been up and running. Another potential point of interest has to do with the exhibitions for the winners. So on the official site, it does say that the winners will get to exhibit their work in a section of the New York Gallery. While it does tell me that I can be assured that my work will be exhibited if I win, it also leaves open quite a bit of possibilities, in a sense that I wouldn't really know which gallery is going to be exhibited at and which section of that gallery, because these things do make a huge difference as to how many people is your work going to be exposed to. But this is probably understandable given the state of the world we are in right now, and also the fact that it's a relatively new competition. And so overall, if I were to give a rating as to how enterable this competition is, I would say as of now, based on what I see, I rate it out of 5 out of 10, because while the entry fees are on par with what the market generally charges, because of the young age of the competition and because of a lot of uncertainty surrounding what the winner's prize are, I would say that it could have been a little bit overpriced as of now, though I'm pretty sure that things will change down the road as years go by. So yeah, that's what I think about the photo competition. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next Saturday. Bye! Hello photographer, welcome back to my channel. It's Belinda. This is where we talk about all... Wait, I couldn't even do my own opening line. Okay, again.